Hello folks and welcome to episode 55 of LD Global Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at LD Global Podcast. My guest today is Jordan J. Garber, who joins us today from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, our first ever Canadian guest. You can follow Jordan at Twitter at Jordan J. Garber. So thanks for coming on today, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's like I've been quite nervous about this all day with the rearrangement of the time, as we've just said off air then, but hopefully it's going to be a cracking podcast that we can both get our teeth into.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's always good for me to get involved being on different shows and just pretty much telling stories and telling people about the name Jordan Garber. It's great.
Yeah, that's great, man. So we're gonna dive straight into this. We're not gonna leave anything out. We're just shooting straight from the hip today. What is your earliest memory of professional wrestling?
Well, I remember pretty much I watched it. My mom never used to let me watch wrestling on TV, and I remember she said to me, "You can watch wrestling on TV now. You're a little older." I was probably around 13 or 14 at the time. And I started watching it on TV, and then a year later, I went to my first event, which was a show in Selkirk, Manitoba, which is just a little small town 20 minutes out of the city of Winnipeg, it's a small city. And there is this place called Steel Town Pro Wrestling, and I checked it out. And from there on, I pretty much developed, I got to know the wrestlers, started to talk to them more and more show after show, and from there on, it led to my first interview with a guy in Alberta named Kamikaze. And pretty much from there on, I skyrocketed up, and I really got into it, and I'll tell you more about that later, of course, in the podcast, but pretty much that's my start. I watched it, my mom started letting me watch it on TV, and after that, I started going to the events.
So what year was this around when you started really getting into it, just so I can have a vibe of what era you were mainly involved in?
That's a good question. Probably around 2007, 2008, I started watching it on TV, and I think in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, was when I saw the first show. So when I started interviewing, I was like young, but you got to remember too, they weren't really top-notch interviews. They were just email interviews. But like when I started actually podcasting, and I really got into it and started getting into interviewing the big names, it was probably 2 years ago once I started getting really, really into it.
Yeah, we mentioned off air some of the guests that you've spoken to on your podcast. Would you like to tell everyone the name of your podcast and some of the guests who you've had on your show, please?
Oh yeah, for sure. I am doing 2 shows right now. I have a podcast on angrymerch.com. There's no interviews added to it yet, but there will be soon, probably within next week. WrestlingWorld247.com is pretty much my main project, and I've interviewed the likes of Chris Masters, the Rhinos, the Kid Cashes, the John Cena Seniors, the Mikey Whipwrecks, among many, many others. You can just go on WrestlingWorld247.com and check out the interviews, the Vance Archers. I can go on, and I'm not one of those guys that I like to brag a lot about these interviews, but I brag in pride because I'm lucky that I'm one of the lucky ones to have interviewed these names before. To me, it's truly an honor and an amazing experience.
How did you get involved with how did the meeting with John Cena Sr. come about? That must have been interesting.
Oh, it was great. What happened was, I was so nervous. I talked to a promoter by the name of Joseph Von Schmidt, and I asked him. He runs PWA down in Connecticut, and he said to me, I said to him, can I get an interview with John Cena Sr. to help promote your show? And he's like, I'm going to ask John Cena Sr. and we'll see what he says. And John Cena Sr., luckily enough, was in it. And I'm not going to say the interview I did with John Cena Sr. was a perfect interview, but I can still say I had that experience, and it was an amazing experience to talk to John Cena's father and just interview him. That's one of my proudest accomplishments so far in the wrestling business, was having that moment, and I thank Joseph Von Schmidt for every part of that. And just to continue to get involved and interview these names, to me, it's an unforgettable experience.
Exactly. You're living most people's dreams who get involved with podcasting. You know, obviously the big dream is to interview those professional wrestlers, as you've done. But because John Cena Sr. is quite an interesting one, because he's not directly involved in the industry, so you can speak about more things with him, can't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. We didn't chat that much after. He pretty much just said, "Okay, when am I doing this? Okay, let's do it. And after this, thank you for your time." He was very professional, but he's a class act for sure.
Yeah.
But it is a dream to some people to interview these names, and it's an awesome for me because I'm lucky I got into it earlier. I'm only 19, and I'm continuing to get involved with this stuff. And to me, it's just I'm lucky I got into this early, and I'm lucky that I'm continuing with it because with wrestling journalism, with wrestling interviews and wrestling media stuff, the sky's the limit.
Exactly. And to be honest, you're probably one of the youngest guests I've had on my podcast anyway. I'm only 20, so I don't feel that old this time or young as compared to some of the people I've had on in the past. But if this is a question I like to ask every guest who I have on the show, how many hours a week do you think you watch wrestling?
How many hours a week?
Yeah.
Well, I do watch, obviously. I got back into the WWE programming, of course. Everyone anyone who's a wrestling fan, they might say they don't, but
they do.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They can say everything they want. You're always going to watch WWE because one thing about WWE is it's the top promotion in the world.
Exactly.
Of course you're going to watch it.
Of course.
I watch WWE. I pretty much watch their programming every Monday and Friday. I watch a lot of independent stuff from your homeland to here in England, of course, as well. Stuff from around the world on my YouTube, on the YouTube, so I check that out. I check out classic stuff, current stuff. So hours per week, I would say about, I don't know, a good 15 to 20.
Wow, it's insane, isn't it? How many hours a week we dedicate to this great sport we love.
Oh, exactly. And I could add something too, is you get what you put in. If you try hard and you get your name out there and you don't be afraid to ask, and that's one thing I had too, is don't be afraid to ask promoters for an interview, to interview these bigger names. Because a lot of times, most of the time, a lot of people just ignore me when I ask a big name for an interview. But a lot of times, they credit your ability and your guts to ask for an interview.
Exactly.
And that's how you build your name on from there.
Exactly.
You make connections, you interview these names, and you get going. And pretty much that's what I've been doing.
What's the worst that can happen, honestly? You know, they can say no, that's it. So, as far as you said, it takes a lot of guts to do this, and I'm really proud, to be honest, to have such someone on the show who's interviewed these names. So, it's great stories, man, what you've been saying so far. If you had to pick one, who would be your favourite wrestler of all time and why?
Favorite wrestler of all time? And when people ask me that question, I'm like, man, like, that's a tough question because there's so many out there that I've enjoyed. I'm pretty much going to say Rhino for all time, just because of what Rhino taught me, the things Rhino had said to me, the advice he gave me. The Rhino, I kind of experienced that Rhino interview experience, and I'll pretty much tell you how it went as well. I'll tell you, all the fans here listening on the LD Global podcast, is I was, I'm good friends with the promoter, and I had the opportunity to interview Rhino for my program, and Rhino, classiest individual you'll ever meet. I'm there backstage, and after the interview with him, he was talking to me for a good 5 to 10 minutes about just stuff and telling me what I could do to get better, stuff I could do, how to get involved more. Rhino, watching him work after that, I've been focused on watching more of his classic matches and matches of all time. I would say Rhino, because Rhino can work. He is an incredibly nice individual. And he's just entertaining. I would say Rhino.
Yeah, like that's quite an interesting one, you know, because everyone would always say like, oh, Stone Cold, The Rock, etc. But it's nice that you've had that kind of experience with someone on a personal level, which obviously adds to why you like him more. Added on to the fact that he's an absolute machine in the ring. Like I don't think I've ever seen a bad Rhino match, which is probably the greatest compliment you can give someone. So, but with Rhino, obviously he's got a heck of a resume as well, being in WWE, ECW, later TNA as well. You know, he was a very good pillar in each of those companies, I thought, anyway.
Oh yeah, and Ryan, you like you said, you hit the nail right on the head. You never see one bad Rhino match. You always, I think of it this way: when you watch a wrestling match, you learn more and more every time.
Exactly.
And that's the part about wrestling that I enjoy personally, is that you never stop learning. Every day when I wake up to do a show or to do an interview like I'm doing for you right now, I always learn something new, and if I'm lucky enough, I could teach someone something new. And that's the part about it that I like too, is you learn more things, you know more about wrestlers, and you always have new things to discover.
Exactly. You learn something, no matter how big or small. You learn something from everyone you come into contact with. I think it's a great value in life. Moving on, anyway, dude. What do you think of some of the current talent in WWE over the past year or so?
Good question. Current talent right now in WWE. It's all right, I guess. But I'll say one thing is that the current talent in WWE is not what the talent used to be.
How do you mean?
The developmental system's different. A lot. I do like one thing I like about a wrestler, and it makes people might nod their heads here. I always like a wrestler that pays their dues in the indies before making it to WWE.
Oh hell yeah, hands down.
Takes me. You know what I mean? It takes me a longer time to believe I like these guys that just go straight up, get signed by WWE, and go on. Like, for example, in all due respect, I'm not here to create controversy, but there's a women's arm wrestling champion. And just because she's a women's arm wrestling champion, she is on WWE, and I'm like, you're awesome. Yeah, you're an awesome arm wrestler. But just because you're an awesome arm wrestler doesn't mean you can be an awesome wrestler no matter how much training you have.
Exactly.
You actually have to love doing it. And that's the test. If you go on the indies and you drive from city to city and go through horrid conditions like they have here in Canada, and you still love doing it, you can tell you love wrestling. Some people are in wrestling because they don't like it, and they just do it just to make money. And pretty much to me, that's a big no.
I don't know. I like Dave Bautista's probably the most notable person who's admitted he only really started out for the money. I don't mind if they start out for the money, but I agree with you. I think they've got to pay their dues. They've got to go to the bingo halls, your high school gymnasiums, you know, your local shows and all that, and work your way up, i.e., you know, the likes of Daniel Bryan and CM Punk and them sort of guys.
And I like the guys who are just in the business to make money, but like the guys like Batista's, like you said. But the only thing I'm saying is I like the guys more who actually pay their dues on the indies. The Daniel Bryans, the CM Punks, the Seth Rollins. He worked his way up a lot before getting to the level he is now.
Yeah.
All of those names had to work for their opportunity, and I'm not gonna lie. Some people that just got signed by WWE out of nowhere didn't work for their opportunity.
Oh yeah, damn straight. But I agree with you. I think they're taking more of that kind of approach lately. Like, if you've seen the recent acquisitions from WWE, Kenta Kobashi, you know, he's been in Japan for absolutely donkey years. Then you've got the likes of Prince Devitt. He's a great wrestler, by the way. You've got to watch out for him. And Kevin Steen. You know, all these guys have been on the independents for years, and it will show, because you can tell who has and who hasn't been doing this for a long time.
Oh, most definitely.
So, I'm fully with you that I think that's where the idea of the developmental system's going to come into play, that the fact that people will have to pay their dues before they get to the top.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing too, and there's one thing in wrestling that I've learned, is that you never stop paying your dues. Whenever I'm at a show or something, I always tend to help out more, because... And that's what they told local guys here in Winnipeg have told stories about Rhino. Picking up a piece of the layers of the ring mat and helping out, picking up a turnbuckle post and carrying it to the truck. Even if the veterans are still nice enough to help out, then you can't be one of those other guys who's wrestled for 2 years or done what I've done for 2 years, and I can't just say, "Oh, I paid my dues, I'm done." No, I'm never going to stop paying my dues. Rhino's never going to stop paying his dues, because in wrestling you never stop paying your dues. If you have that mindset, you can go very far with it.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's a very good statement. I like that statement. I'm going to use that again. If you could pick one match in history to have been on the front row of, what one would that be and why?
Well, a lot of your guests would probably answer to this one, but say the same answer to this one. But seeing, I wish I was born around the time, or I was alive around the time that Hulk Hogan wrestled Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. If I was in the front row to see that, wow, that would have been amazing.
Exactly.
Whoever's in the front row to see that match, like, wow, you are one lucky individual.
Why that match in particular?
Just because of the history. Just because of the whole history-making process in that whole match. Not just for wrestling, but for pop culture at that time. To be a part of something like that is spectacular. I would sit in the cheap seats, the nosebleeds, to see that match. That match pretty much revolutionized professional wrestling into what it is today.
It's funny you should mention the cheap seats. That was going to lead on to my next question. Would you ever go to a WrestleMania if you were in the worst seat possible?
Oh, of course, yeah. Like you say, there's as long as it's good wrestling, good legit wrestling, and of course it's WrestleMania, it's the best it can be. Of course, I would sit. If there's the crappiest seat out there, I would still sit there and watch it. Of course, yeah, I'm watching a free WrestleMania live event and watching the best in the world compete. Why wouldn't I? WrestleMania for sure. I would definitely, if I had the cheapest seat in the house, I would still watch it for sure.
Exactly, yeah, and you don't go to WrestleMania just for the stadium aspect, do you? You go for the whole access tour the week before and the whole buzz of just being at a WrestleMania.
Oh yeah, exactly, and just the memory of, and you saying that you've been to a WrestleMania is pretty enjoyable too.
Exactly. Because we were, well, I'd like to think we're kind of we are the same age anyway, being 19 and 20. We weren't alive, or we weren't the oldest people in the WWF versus WCW Attitude Era Monday Night Wars, were we? But I'm sure, as well as me, you've gone back through time and done all your research and watched it all relentlessly, I'm assuming anyway. What side do you reckon you would have been on if you'd have been the age you're at now? Team WWF or Team WCW?
Well, that's a very good question, but you kind of, it was a different time too. You'd kind of have to ask, like, if I was like really into it at that time of WWF and WCW at that exact point during the middle of the war, who would I choose? Because now that WWF won that war, which is obviously now the WWE, of course, look what it's turned into now. You see all these popular stars, and you look at WCW, and some guys, well, like obviously the lower card guys, you haven't really, it's like, who's that? But that's with the WWF too. If I were to choose the WWF and WCW, and like I said, those stars are still obviously big names if they made it to WWF or WCW, but I don't know. I think it's okay to see that WWF won the war. But let me ask you a question. If WCW won the war against the WWF, what would wrestling be today? Pretty much.
I think it'd just be pure attitude all the time. I've got to, because very edgy, wasn't it, WCW, up until the Attitude Era came along. Nothing's going to, because if they'd have won the war with that kind of mentality, I think they'd have just stuck with it the entire time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or we'd have had the biggest NWO in history, so the amount of members what were in there towards the end, I dread to think what it'd be like if they were still in business. There'd be about 500 people in the NWO, so I think the right team won the war.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? And you're always going to have those people that complain about the WWE product, but the thing is that you're always going to have complainers. You're always going to have people that complain about wrestling, and pretty much what I say is, yeah, if you want to speak your mind about it, speak your mind, but don't think it's so bad, because it's wrestling, right?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It might still be entertainment. Vince McMahon might still make wrestling WWE sports entertainment, but at least it's still technically wrestling.
Exactly.
And that's what I like.
The people I don't like are the ones who watch it just to bash the product. If you don't want to watch it that much, don't watch it.
Oh yeah, and that's for anything too. If I don't want to watch, I don't know, if I don't want to watch the Boston Red Sox game or the Kansas City Royals game or something, I'm just not going to watch it, right?
Exactly.
And that should just be the same way for wrestling. You don't have to complain about it because other people might love it.
It feels like in wrestling you've got to watch it just so you can bash it, because it's hard. It's a bit different if you're hearing it secondhand. Because what a great show is to someone could be a terrible show to someone else. So
yeah, exactly.
We're going to move on to a couple of controversial topics at the moment, Jay, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Ask me anything.
All right, we're going to shoot straight from the hip on these next couple questions, so be ready, folks. Sexism. I'm just going to say that word and let you run with it.
Sexism, obviously in professional wrestling.
Yes, sir.
Sexism in professional wrestling, lots of it going on. I've been in situations before in which sexism has occurred. I can't say I've been a part of any of those issues. Most of the time, towards women, I am very respectful and always respect their space and everything. As for sexism in professional wrestling, the sad fact is that wrestling is a tough business, and that's going to happen. Things are going to happen backstage that not everyone's going to agree with, but it's something unfortunate that occurs in wrestling, and it's something you just got to realize that just happens.
How do you think the women in WWE are portrayed? Do you think they're portrayed as athletes or more, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like eye candy.
You hit the nail right on the head there. Most, not all, but most women's wrestlers in the WWE are strictly being used for eye candy. They can't work in the ring. If you were to go to an independent show and you were to watch the likes of the Vita Scotts, the Casey Carlisles, the Leah Von Dutches, among others, those are women that could work. A lot of women's wrestlers in the WWE lack the wrestling ability and are just signed because they're hot. And that's the reality to it. It's what a local wrestler said to me as well here. I made a status. I remember making a tweet about why did the WWE sign Eva Marie? And one simple wrestling veteran said, because she's hot and she has a look. Not that she can wrestle, just because she looks good.
Obviously,
doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it
because
doesn't.
You can look good and still be a good wrestler at the same time.
Exactly. It's the same with most of the men as well, because you look at like the likes of John Cena and Randy Orton. They're not ugly dudes. They're very well groomed guys, and they're obviously, it's the look as well as their wrestling ability what they look at. But I think on the women's side, I think they just totally go for more mainstream appeal, like whatever's the current hot topic at the moment. That's what they go for. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with the independent wrestler what you said. They're just signed on their aesthetic looks, not the physical stature. Like you look at the women like Beth Phoenix and Karma, they could really go in the ring. Where, as you said, someone like Eva Marie or Rosa Mendez, they couldn't wrestle to save their life.
Yeah.
So, but
let me say one thing too, though. In wrestling, though, in order to be successful in the business, most of the time you do need a good look. And if the women have a good look and could wrestle, then you are doing your job correctly. And you just got to be patient. If you always have to have a good look most of the time if you want to focus on the wrestling part. But if you don't have the best look, you can always do something else with wrestling. That's the good thing about it, is you can always find more things to get involved in.
Oh,
but if you want to be a wrestler and make it, you got to have a good look.
Exactly. I just feel like the employing women these days in the wrestling industry, well, especially WWE, for the Total Divas show, and I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen it. I've seen a bit of one episode, but it doesn't seem like something that appeals to me. I don't know about you.
To me, it's like, it kind of makes me feel like we're watching wrestling here, not a reality show, but at the same time, maybe they're using Total Divas to enhance the storylines. So
Maybe.
you never know from that part as well.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, we'll drive away from the sexism topic now. We're going to go full throttle onto this one, though. Racism in professional wrestling. What's your stance?
Happens all the time, unfortunately. Not just in professional wrestling, but in the world today. I've been in locker rooms where racism occurred, like I said, like where sexism has occurred. There's going to be a lot of racism in wrestling. There's going to be a lot of stereotypical things happening in wrestling, and there's going to be a lot of hatred in wrestling because one chooses a lifestyle that they choose to be, and I kind of wish people didn't live in the business wasn't like that at times, but there is a lot of racism occurring in professional wrestling, and the only thing you can do is just if you're in the middle of a situation with it, you try to make your voice heard and to try to stop it. But if it's happening to other people and you're not around it, there's not really much you can do but hope that it simmers down a little bit, pretty much.
Yeah, it's just I can't really comment because I've never experienced it myself, like in a wrestling environment. But do you think the fact that there's never been a full African American black WWE champion in their history has does it have any weight behind it, or do you think it's just solely down to chance?
I personally think that's a coincidence. That's not the case. There have been some black champions in WWE, and you think of it this way: if WWE was racist and they did hate black people, then why would they sign a black wrestler in the first place of any black origin? And that goes for anyone. If they didn't like Jewish wrestlers or English wrestlers or whatever, why would they sign them? I don't think there's a racism part. Personally, I think there's a coincidence, but in the locker room, it's sad because some people are always going to continue to be racist, or like you talked about earlier, sexist. And sometimes, that's a lot of times that's pretty wrong. So, it's just something, unfortunately, that happens in our day-to-day lives, not just in the business, but in the real world, and not in the real world. But
yeah, I know what you mean.
I know what you mean. Like in life, I'll say life outside of wrestling.
Yeah.
And those things are going to happen, and that's the stuff you're going to have to realize that goes on, and sometimes it can't be stopped.
I like the fact you mentioned bringing up the English talent as well, because only one other guest I've ever had has brought in the fact when I've said racism, they didn't bring up any like English or Asian competitors. Do you think that, like, to my knowledge, like, I don't think there's ever been a WWE champion that's been black, British, or Asian. So do you think it's like an American? Like, because I'm getting the vibe here at the moment that it's WWE's main champion has always been a white American, bar the odd one or two foreign people.
Yeah, that's something you could debate about, and it's true. We haven't seen many world champions in the WWE that have been of those
ethnicity and background,
explained.
yeah.
But pretty much, I don't think it could be something to do with racism, or it could just be something to do because WWE has a worldwide audience, but mostly what they're focusing on is that their North American demographic. It could be that too.
Well, I feel like their bigger audience is outside of America, and I just don't think that they're tapping into it enough. Like a podcast ages ago, John Cena and Stone Cold Steve Austin, if I'm not mistaken, Cena mentioned that like the fourth biggest market in the world is China, and they don't tap into it enough. I feel like WWE could host WrestleManias anywhere in the world and they would sell out. So I don't know. I feel like myself, they're holding back a bit worldwide. I don't know about you.
That's a good question too. You think of it this way: why does WWE? Why does all the WWE's programming, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, have their shows on only in the United States and Canada? Why couldn't there be more? Not all. Why couldn't there be? And this happened before. Monday Night Raws in England or Monday Night Raws maybe around the world. Maybe there's a Monday Night Raw in China or a Monday Night Raw in Russia. Why not span the world a little bit, go around the globe?
Exactly.
Maybe that would be kind of cool to see.
Exactly. I think they should. I think it's down to a scheduling type of thing. What they should do is, like, if WWE was broken down into the seasons of the year, like you got spring, summer, autumn, and winter, they could spend a different part each season in a different part of the world. And then obviously always come back to America. If they feel the need to have the WrestleMania in America or Canada, so be it. But I don't know why they don't use the other pay-per-views across the world, like SummerSlam. You imagine a SummerSlam in Mexico. You know, how great would that be?
Oh yeah, most definitely. But you got to think of one thing too. It's funny, kind of a bit funny, Lewis, because we had this issue before. Is that the time zone things? If you air it in the United States, which is their main audience, how are they going to air if they're a few hours ahead? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't see a problem in that because being from the UK, we've got to suffer every Monday night. We've got to stay up till 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. just to watch a rubbish version of Raw. So I think America and Canada have got to pay their dues as well.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah. Very good observation there.
As you said, we've got to pay our dues as well. So I think the fans have to as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point there.
All right, we'll stay away from the time zones. I don't want to upset all my European following and my North American following as well. So we'll move on, dude. All right, Jay. If you could change one thing in wrestling, what would it be and why?
Be patient, make connections, and just be passionate about what you're doing. How you feel passionate about what you're doing is before you do an interview and after an interview you feel excited or have that adrenaline rush. That's how you know you love it. Pretty much just believe in yourself, keep going, and if times are tough, you keep trying, and just be patient and just have fun, pretty much.
So that's the one thing you'd change is like people's patience.
Oh, I thought the one piece of advice. I thought you were asking. The one thing you could change.
Yeah, one thing you could change. No, that's a good piece of advice as well, folks. Just stay determined, be patient. I think that's a good life skill in itself. But
there's one thing I could change. Okay, and you know what? And a lot of people listening to this might agree, or not agree. I'm not sure. There's one thing I could change too. I'm getting better, but sometimes I tend to go on a little. I tend to be a little, I don't know, braggy. I like to brag a lot sometimes. I pretty much, and that's not all the time. That's just at times. Most of the times, I be a professional, and of course, I do the best I can. I be a professional, but at times, and like anybody, everyone gets a little overconfident. The one thing pretty much I could change is to just chill out and treat this more like as it being something fun. And it is fun, obviously, and I make it fun, but just to relax a little more about it, not be so wound up about it, and just to enjoy every step of the way, pretty much, which I've been doing. But pretty much the bottom line is, if there's one thing I could change, I'd be straight up. Sometimes I wish when those times I have an attitude, I would change it, because when you have a bad attitude in wrestling, it's not going to lead you to anything. I would tend to be more cool, calm, and collected. A little more calm sometimes.
Yeah, it's cool. If you could change one thing within the wrestling industry as well, we're going a little tangent here. If you could change one thing for the product, what would it be?
If I could change one thing in the wrestling industry, that's a good question. Pretty much just I would try to make it have. It's a good question. Wow. I might have to get back to you on that question.
Yeah, we'll come back to that at the end. We'll save that one till last if you want. We've got 3 or 4 more questions. Then we'll let you go back. So what time is it in Canada? Did you say? Sorry, it's what 2:30 in the afternoon.
Right now it is 2:35 p.m.
2:35. Right. We won't keep you much longer, so you can go and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, dude. Would you ever start your own wrestling company?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would. You know what? And that's one thing you learn in the wrestling business is never say never. You never know. Maybe one day I might want to be interested in starting my own wrestling company. I think it would be good. The thing about being a promoter is you just don't slap a card together and say you have a show at this community center. It takes a lot of work. But
for sure.
if I could get a wrestling company started, and if I had good resources and good talent, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, we should do an inter-promotional wrestling company, UK versus Canada type theme. I think that would be good.
Well, that would be great. Travel costs, though.
Oh yeah, I'm sure someone can help us out with some funding. Okay, dude. This is a question that I've just made up, considering like some of the big names you've interviewed in the past. If you could choose one wrestler or anyone from the wrestling industry to interview for 1 hour, who would it be and why?
Anyone I could interview for 1 hour, I would have to say maybe Vince McMahon, Vern Gagne, or Lou Thesz.
You have to pick one of them three.
If I had to pick one of them, it would be Vince McMahon.
What would be the main question if someone took your hour away from you, but only give you one question for Vince? What would it be and why?
My one question, and why I say Vince McMahon too, first off, is because Vince McMahon's not going to do. I might be wrong. He rarely does any interviews. He's the biggest name in professional wrestling, and once he's, people like him or not, he's made wrestling what it is today.
Exactly.
That's why I would choose Vince McMahon, of course. And plus, he's so hard. He's probably the hardest person in the world to get an interview with. But if I could ask him one question, it would be, look back to when you were a kid watching wrestling, when your father was promoting it. Look at what it is now, what you've turned wrestling into. That could be a negative question or a positive question. I would ask that. Are you proud of what you've done? You've changed the face of professional wrestling around the world. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that'd be a great question, and it'd be a great answer to hear what he would say as well. Okay, dude. Well, this is my main event question, and then we'll come back to the one thing that you could change pretty quickly. If you could create your own WrestleMania main event, 1 versus 1, with any 2 wrestlers in history, who would they be? Why? And who would win?
Ooh, that's a good question. If I could choose them between 2 wrestlers and be first off, let's say you have a lot of good questions.
Thank you, sir.
Let's say I would mix old school with new school. I would mix pretty much. I would say Hulk Hogan and John Cena would be a pretty good one.
Who would you have come out on top? The Hulkamania or C-Nation?
Hulkamania.
Yeah.
Put Hulk over again.
Yeah, for sure. Would you have Cena as a heel or just keep him face?
I would see Cena as a heel. And why I say that is because the odds of that happening are next to none. And seeing Cena as a heel against Hulk Hogan, that would be such a cool thing to picture for sure.
Exactly. I think that would be absolutely brilliant. And who knows, we might get this match at WrestleMania 31. So, we'll move back to the question what you wanted more time to think of. If you could change one thing in the wrestling industry, what would it be and why? And we'll leave that as our final main event of the question.
Yeah, pretty much. I pretty much thought about it, and pretty much if there's one thing I could change in wrestling and why, is people tend to take wrestling so seriously, and I can say that before in the past I've been one of those people that have taken wrestling way, way too seriously. But if wrestling wasn't taken like extremely seriously, which you should be if you're a wrestler making a living off independent wrestling, of course you make it seriously. But to be so negative about it, I would just change the negative things backstage. You know, the negative rumors, the politics. There's too much politics in professional wrestling. Change all of that stuff and just make it, you do your match, you got your match, go to the back, go to the bar with the rest of the wrestlers, you have a good night. You get booked on your next show, you do the same process again. If that were to happen, the wrestling world would be a better place for sure. It's already a good place, but if that were to happen, it would most definitely be a better place.
Exactly. It takes all the crap out in between, doesn't it? It's a good industry to be involved in, and let's make it enjoyable. Let's make it like as big as the NFL and the NBA and other big sports like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, that concludes our great podcast today, folks. So I want to thank Jordan Garber. Well, it's Jordan J. Sorry, Jordan J. Garber for coming on the show today. Again, you can follow him at Jordan J. Garber. So, would you like to plug your podcast again for us, dude? Just so I don't get it wrong.
Yeah, pretty much. I have you guys stay tuned to angrymarks.com. I do some shows for them. I do the SmackDown Rundown. I also do. I'm having a new weekly interview segment on that site as well. angrymarks.com is a good place to be to check out some of my stuff. You can listen to my old interviews and some future interviews as well, bits of some future interviews I'm doing for my own personal website, and that is, of course, WrestlingWorld247.com. I gave you another extra point. You plugged my Twitter, which was awesome. And, yeah, man, if you ever want to have me on any other time, I would be more than willing to be on again.
Yeah, it'd be an absolute pleasure, dude, because it's nice expanding. And one thing I'd want to say before the end of this podcast is the fact that, the people I've met through doing this, I've met a few people from America, from in my own country as well, who I didn't even know existed, people up in Scotland as well. And to branch out to Canada, I'm not going to lie, I marked out a little this morning about just doing this interview, so I've been quite nervous, but hopefully it comes out as good as I think it sounds to myself anyway. It's been an absolute...
No problem, you did great, and it's always good to talk to new wrestling people involved in the wrestling business, or just fans any time of the day. It's always good to meet new people involved with wrestling, for sure.
Exactly, man, and as you said, it'd be an absolute pleasure to have you on again, the show soon.
No problem, time.
if you ever need a guest as well, just hook us up, DM us on Twitter, folks. So yeah, stay tuned. When do your show drop? Or are you currently in the process of?
Yeah, you just stay tuned on the Angry Marks podcast network, angrymarks.com, for some of my shows. The SmackDown Rundown I just did should be up soon. But just stay tuned on it on angrymarks.com. Just check once a week or something, and you should see my stuff up there if you surf the website well enough. Main place to listen to my interviews, though, for now, is WrestlingWorld247.com. That's where I got my start. That's where I started with my show. That's where I started with my website. If you want to listen to any of my interviews, just check out WrestlingWorld247.com.
Well, there you go, folks. Stay tuned with Jordan's podcasts, and obviously keep checking this podcast out at LD Global Podcast. Again, Jordan, it's been a pleasure, and love to have you on again soon. So stay safe and keep watching wrestling as far as I can say.
No problem, man. Thank you.
Right, see you later, dude.
All right.